they're not understanding how animal rights, human rights, environmental protection, all of these things are very, very tightly linked together. It's not one thing or the other thing. It's not only nice to be animals, it's a necessity to be kind to animals.
Hello and welcome to the Green Hero series. I am Nirmai from Celsius, and today we are delighted to be joined by Ms. Poorva Joshipura. Ms. Poorva Joshipura is a best selling author and president of PETA International and one of the most influential voices in the global movement to end animal exploitation. Over the past 2 decades, she has led bold campaigns, undercover investigations, and high impact legal actions across continents. Her work has reshaped policies, inspired millions, and challenged the world to rethink its relationship with animals. In this conversation, we explore her journey, her vision, and her drive to basically mobilize this entire generation, especially the Gen Z, to work towards protecting animals and to prevent animal exploitation and encourage them to become change makers. So, ma'am, welcome to the show. We are very happy to have you here with us today. My first question is that you have spent more than half of your life working in this field. So, was there a particular moment or a particular milestone that inspired you to take this course or that anchored your commitment towards this cause?
Yes, I there were a few. There were a few things that happened that led me to dedicate my life to protecting animals. The first was when I was around 16 years old. And, I, even though my parents grew up as vegetarians, I grew up eating meat. I grew up eating meat. I grew up wearing leather shoes. I grew up buying any sort of cosmetics or anything I wanted that were tested on animals. I would go to the circus. And despite all of those things, I considered myself as somebody who cares about animals. I just didn't see the disconnect between my behavior and my feelings toward animals until a friend of mine, when we were 16 years old, we were in a mall food court together, and she went and got something vegetarian, and I went and got a McDonald's chicken burger. And when we sat back down, she said, "Are you really going to eat that?" And at the time, I said, "Well, yeah, what's the problem?" And she said, "Well, it's an animal." And that was the first time. I still ate the chicken burger that day, but that was the first time I thought about it. And even though my own mother was vegetarian, I thought of that as more cultural. And this is the first time I was able to think about it from an ethics perspective. It took somebody challenging me to do that. So after that, this friend of mine and I, she's still one of my best friends in the world. We embarked on a journey to learn more about what happens to animals for food. We ordered magazines from PETA, we watched videos, and we were horrified to learn what happens behind the scenes, behind closed doors, and how animals suffer their entire lives for what is, after all, just a fleeting moment of taste on our tongues. So we became vegetarian together, and then we became vegan after learning also about how cows and buffaloes suffer for the dairy industry, how because male cows and buffaloes, because they cannot produce milk, are often starved. This is what happens in India. They're often starved or left on the roads or sent to slaughter. And the more you learn about it, the more it's difficult to continue doing something that you know is harming somebody else. So that was the first time that that's how I went vegan. But how I dedicated my life to animal protection is another story. So when I first started out with PETA, I was given the opportunity to be an investigator. And I was visiting a slaughterhouse in Kolkata. And this was the first time I had ever been to a slaughterhouse. And just approaching the slaughterhouse, the smell, it's the smell of, or the stench of, I don't know, decades worth of animals being cut up on the floor, blood, guts, urine, feces, fear. And so before you even enter the slaughterhouse, that's what you smell. And when I walked into the slaughterhouse, there was a calf who was being pushed toward the slaughter floor. And he was really trying hard to save his own life. He was, standing and, really trying to push against the men who were trying to push him into the slaughter floor. But he was not strong enough. And he was, crying, crying probably for his mother, who was probably killed herself. And then when they roped his legs and he hit the floor with a thud, it was in that moment that his eyes actually locked with mine. And I couldn't save him that day because what was happening to him was allowed. It was legal in West Bengal. And I couldn't save him that day, but looking at him in that moment, it made me realize that he thinks I'm actually one of these other people who are out to hurt him. That's what he thinks. So I made a mental promise to that calf that I couldn't save him, but I would spend the rest of my life saving other animals like him. And that's what I've done. And I think about that calf all the time, if not every day, then nearly every day. And I've done my best to stick to that promise for him.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's so it does make one vulnerable. It does make one question, reflect. And thank you so much for sharing that. And it's just so fascinating that a simple conversation at a McDonald's led to so many incidences. And now finally you are heading one of the largest organizations in the world that works in this particular domain and has an international presence. So, my next question to you is that PETA has an international presence, it has a global outlook. But at the same time, I'm sure that in your work, there will be moments where regional cultures and regional practices will be taken into consideration while you're working. So, have there been instances where cultural sensitivity has informed the strategy that you adopt?
Oh, absolutely. So PETA works on a number of global campaigns because there's lots of companies, for example, corporations that hurt animals that are global in scale. So every PETA that, PETA India, for example, or PETA UK, PETA US, these are not the same PETA. Each one of them is its own organization. So PETA India, in that sense, is not related to PETA US. It's not related to PETA Australia. They're different organizations which are called PETA. And the reason for this is because there's strength in doing that. It's an opportunity for these different groups to come together and to work together to try to get these, major corporations that are often global in scale to change their practices. Whether that's encouraging them to have more vegan foods or getting them to stop selling fur or, transition from animal leather to leather made from plants, which also exists these days. So that's why there's, you know, different organizations called PETA so that they can work together on these issues. But so many of the issues that PETA works on are local, are regional. For instance, in India, we have so many campaigns that exist which are specific to India. One of those is just yesterday, we had worked with Shekhar Dhawan, the cricketer, to gift a mechanical elephant to a temple. So, what these mechanical elephants are is it's a way for temples to engage in traditional practices, but with a mechanical elephant, allowing real elephants to remain in nature, in the jungles with their families, as God intended them to do. So that's one very exciting local initiative that we're working on, and we got involved with that because elephants who are kept in temples, even if the best intentions may be there, but a temple environment is not suitable for an animal who has been born to walk vast distances in the jungle, to live with a family, to raise their young, to swim, to engage their minds. Instead, what happens in a temple setting is that they're chained to the floor, often alone, and they're kept like this for decades on end. We recently rescued an elephant from a temple in Maharashtra. She had been kept by herself for 33 years, chained to the floor. 33 years. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm going to maybe guess this
24,
is,
yeah.
well, for more time than you've been alive, this elephant, whatever you've done in your life, you've gone to school, you've gone to college, met with your friends, whatever you've done, traveled probably, maybe gone to another country, whatever you've done, in that entire time, this thinking, feeling being was chained to the same spot on a concrete floor. So you can imagine the state of her. So she was, because of this cruelty, she was so disturbed that she actually killed the temple priest. Um, she attacked another man. So keeping elephants in temples is not only cruel to them, but it's also harmful for people. So we thought we need to come up with some type of win-win solution. We understand that it's a tradition to keep elephants in temples. Tradition doesn't make it right, but we understand it's a tradition. But now with the help of technology, there's a better way. We can use robotic elephants to perform the pujas, to perform the same function. So we had come up with that. Now some 20 or so temples in India use the robotic technology instead of elephants. So that's an example of one very, very local campaign that we're working on. And there's so many others like that. At the same time, there's also, we also take progress that happens in another country and try to make progress in another country. As an example is cosmetic testing on animals. Europe was the first to prohibit the testing of cosmetics on animals. We took that information and we persuaded Indian authorities to also ban the testing of cosmetics and their ingredients on animals. So there's some knowledge sharing also that can happen from that global perspective. So both, yes, regional and global.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point that you mentioned that animal cruelty-free products are quite the quite in trend these days because now people are being more and more conscious about the products that they use, and that's a lot of brands are actually taking a lot of pride in packaging themselves as cruelty-free, as vegan. So my question is that going ahead, how do you think these let's call them, compliances of being cruelty free and being vegan, or as a conscious choice that a brand makes in order to stand for a cause. How will this change in the going, in the years ahead, and which industries will be affected? Food, pharma,
Mm-hmm.
fashion. Which industries do you see embracing the cruelty-free and vegan branding or messaging, so to speak, very vehemently?
So, there was a time in the not too recent past, a couple of decades ago, where there wasn't any cosmetics that were not tested on animals. Pretty much all cosmetics were tested on animals. It was a requirement by law in many countries, maybe all countries. And it took people to say, no, I do not accept, I do not want a lipstick or an eyeshadow which has come from putting a poison into a rabbit's eyes, or which has come from putting a poison, a chemical on a rabbit's skin. This is not okay by me. So it was through people saying that the cosmetics companies thought, okay, what's a different way of doing this? And in looking for that different way, they actually came up with better ways. Because ultimately, what happens to a rabbit or a mouse or a guinea pig or a rat cannot necessarily predict how that chemical is going to react on a human being. And so they came up with more human relevant techniques of testing cosmetics and their ingredients. Also, things like laundry detergent and that kind of thing, household products on animals. And now we have so many companies that have signed up to avoid cosmetic testing on animals. Laws have changed. PETA offers a logo scheme to help people more easily see which brands of cosmetics test on animals and which don't. We have a little logo. It says cruelty-free. It's a little rabbit. People can log on to PETAindia.com, and we have a database of companies that test on animals or that don't test on animals. So people should look up their favorite companies in that database and only support those cosmetics brands that are not testing on animals. Uh, Even though cosmetic testing on animals is banned in India, the reason why we still encourage people to go to that database is because the same company might be testing on animals somewhere else, in China or some other country. So we encourage people to buy only from those cosmetics brands that are not testing on animals anywhere in the world. And that's why we encourage people to look that up on our database.
Yeah. And just a follow-up question, what is the future of the lab-grown, alternatives that are now being pushed by a lot of companies? And there seems to be a lot of interest and buzz around the lab-grown technology. So would
Mhm.
like to have your remark on that as well.
Yeah, look, lab grown meat, lab grown leather. Maybe one day it will be developed to scale. Maybe one day it'll be more easily available. But we don't have to wait for that day to help animals. We can choose to help animals today. Because well, every single person who goes vegan saves the lives of up to 200 animals a year. So just by going vegan, you can save the lives of that many animals. And these days, even though, most Indian food, even for meat eaters, most of the foods that they would be eating, especially in an Indian diet, are actually vegan. Okay, maybe, especially if you just have the vegetarian food without the ghee or without the paneer, that's about it. Then most vegetarian Indian food is vegan already. So you can just have your regular Indian diet, and probably most people are already eating a lot of vegan, They don't even realize it. But if you are interested in having the meaty taste or that texture, it's more about the texture. If you're interested in having that, then there's so many vegan meat companies out there that you can try. In India too, there's vegan meat companies, there's vegan cheese companies, vegan ice cream, vegan yogurts. So you don't even have to miss any of these foods. But by making this simple choice that, okay, instead of a meat burger, I'll have a vegan burger that tastes like meat, you are sparing animals from a lifetime of misery. And what we do to animals on for food is so horrific and so unimaginable. I mean, nowadays, about 70% of animals in the world who are used for food are factory farmed. 70%, including in India. And what that means is that in order to meet the heavy demand for meat, eggs, and dairy, these animals, chickens, cows, pigs, other animals that people eat, are crammed into severely confined spaces in either cages or crates or in sheds to the point that they essentially cannot move. There's no space to move. They are made to stand and sit in their own waste. They're denied absolutely everything that makes life worth living. And their bodies are manipulated. For instance, chickens used for meat are bred to be so top heavy that after about 6 weeks, they're so heavy at the top that their legs buckle, that their legs break, they start having heart attacks. I mean, that's what we're doing to these animals. For what? For something that sits on your tongue for a few seconds of time? No. We can, every time we sit down to eat, we can choose to be cruel or to be kind. That's the choice that we're making every single time for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, every single time. And it's an easy choice. It's an easy choice, especially now. I mean, when I went vegan, there was none of this. There was no vegan meat or any of that. We didn't need it. We didn't need it. But look, now it's there. Okay, fine. If you want to have it, you can have it. It's not required, but it's there. It makes it even easier. It makes it even easier to save hundreds of animals a year through this very small, easy dietary change.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Like you rightly said, it all begins with a simple choice that's actually very easy for us to make with a little bit of resolve and willpower. So, ma'am, my next question to you is like you spoke about, the campaign in India where you introduced a mechanical elephant in the temple, and PETA is known for its bold and provocative campaigns, not just in India but across the world. And how do you decide? So, my question is, how do you decide when you have to be confrontational and take sort of a confrontational approach, and when you have to be collaborative, with the regional communities or the regional beliefs?
To best explain this and why PETA does it, the colorful campaigns, maybe people who are watching this have also seen PETA members out, on a street somewhere wearing maybe dresses made of lettuce or some kind of costume or, this type of thing, or locking ourselves in cages. The reason that we do these things is because as an NGO, we do not have crores and crores. We don't have almost any advertising budget. Unlike, say, for example, if we're talking about a McDonald's, they will spend millions and millions just on advertising. We don't have that. So that's what we're up against. And that's just one company, selling meat. So instead, in order to make sure that we are advocating for the animals as best as what we can, we have to make sure that we're not ignored and that people notice us. And that's why we do those colorful campaigns, so that we get the conversations going. We get people thinking about the plight of animals. We get people thinking that cows are not fabric, or that a chicken is a wonderful, sensitive being who doesn't want to die. And it's through that we're able to get, through that creativity and that boldness, that we're able to get mileage in the media or in social media and get people's attention, because we simply cannot afford, for the sake of the animals, to for people not to notice us and not to notice our message. So that's why PETA does the bold and the provocative and sort of campaigns, because we have to. We have to make sure that people think about it and that they're hearing about it and that it stays with them. And for I've done a number of these street theater type of protests myself. Um, in Delhi, for instance, I was experimented on like a beagle is at a laboratory on the street. I've hung from a meat hook to help people understand about to to get them to think about, well, if it's disturbing for you to see a woman hung by a meat hook, what's the difference between that and a goat who's hung by a meat hook? So, this kind of thing. And it's because maybe it seems a little bit silly or, something like that to a person, but whatever it is, if it's silly, if it's shocking, somebody has to feel something. And so it's in order to get people to feel and to think that we do these kinds of things.
Indeed. And I'm sure that these campaigns have been successful to that extent because they do get reported into the media and they do generate that kind of traction. So, my next question to you is that when you're doing such campaigns and you're actively engaging with various stakeholders, a lot of times there comes a moment or there comes a situation where animal rights start conflicting with traditional livelihoods or livelihoods in general. There's this whole debate of livelihoods versus animal rights. So, in that particular situation or in any such situation where there is a conflict between your cause and a reality that exists in the society, how do you navigate this particular conflict, especially on ground?
So, I think livelihood is often used as an excuse not to change, and there's no real loss of livelihood. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, in Mumbai, we work to transition horse carriage drivers to electronic carriages. They fought and they fought against it, but once they actually transitioned to the electronic carriages, it was more profitable for them. And now we work with these guys to we're trying to encourage Kolkata to do the same thing. So sometimes there's that initial kind of resistance, but look, we do need to modernize and progress as a society to kinder ways. And similarly, we're not asking people to stop selling shoes. We're asking them to make shoes out of a different material. We're not asking people to stop selling food. But the more that people transition to focusing on eating plants, the jobs will simply shift toward that type of food production as compared to this type of food production. And we also have to think about the tremendous job losses and the tremendous economic impact of meat, egg, and dairy production, because it is one of the most damaging industries to the planet. 1/5 of global greenhouse gas emissions are emitted from animals used for food. The climate catastrophe that is being caused in great part because of meat, egg, and dairy production is already causing huge weather extremes and huge economic damages. So I think we have to look at things more wholly and really in perspective when we're talking about economic loss and things like that, because the economic loss of the climate catastrophe is tremendous. And when we're talking about things like tradition and culture, tradition and culture change. They change because if it was the way it was once upon a time, then you and me wouldn't even be having this conversation. because we wouldn't have been allowed to have this conversation. We wouldn't have been allowed to work. We would be, relegated to duties at home or whatever it is. So things change, things progress. They've progressed for women as they rightly should have had. And it also needs to progress for animals. We cannot rank tradition higher than somebody's well being. We can have tradition and we can enjoy our cultural festivities, but we can do it kind. And if that means that we have to make some adjustments and change, so be it. That's what it means.
Yeah, I think thank you so much. I think there was a very pertinent point that you made, and I was particularly intrigued by the part where you linked animal rights with climate change, public health, and also I think going ahead with environmentalism and the kind of lifestyle health that human beings in general have. So all these issues are very complexly interlinked. Like they're one issue affects the another, right? So my
Yeah.
next question is, how are policymakers addressing this particular issue? Are they acknowledging the linkages within them? And at the policy front, are there any significant changes that we are seeing?
So I'm glad you asked this question because I've written a whole book about this. It's called Survival at Stake. And the reason why I wrote this book is because I was always being asked, what about humans or what about the environment? You care about animals, but what about humans? What about the environment? What about this and what about that? And I realized that people are asking me this because they're not understanding how animal rights, human rights, environmental protection, all of these things are very, very tightly linked together. It's not one thing or the other thing. It's not only nice to be animals, it's a necessity to be kind to animals. And so, what I take people through in the book is the link between meat, egg, and dairy production and things like the climate catastrophe. I help people understand that simply by going vegan, we can reduce our individual carbon footprint from food by up to 73%, for instance, or the very fact that, some 70% of animals in the world are now factory farmed. Well, in such crowded systems on factory farms, where you have tens of thousands of chickens, for instance, all crammed together, disease spreads very easily. Disease spreads like wildfire in those types of filthy and overcrowded conditions. And so we have things now like bird flu. H5N1 bird flu, it has a 60% mortality rate in human beings, and it spreads through chicken farms. And it's because of things like that that these animals are pumped full of antibiotics. So there's more antibiotics that are used in animals used for food than even there is in people. Now, this overuse of antibiotics, what is now happening? It's creating a situation when we need antibiotics to work, such as if we're very sick. Then those antibiotics, because of its overuse in the food chain, are starting to become less and less effective or not effective in human beings. So there's all sorts of ways that how we treat animals affects us. Leather, for instance, is the most polluting material in fashion. And not only is it incredibly polluting, it causes cancer, respiratory disease, all sorts of health problems in people who work in and live near leather tanneries. So if we're kind to animals, we're actually also kinder to ourselves. When you ask about what policymakers can do or should do, well, policymakers at the end of the day are just people like you and me. And, governments are made up of people, of human beings like you and me. Corporations are made up of people like you and me. So the more that we understand these issues as a society, and the more that we demand better, and the more that we recognize that there's some things that have to change if we want to turn the trajectory around, if we want to protect ourselves from even worsening effects of climate change and things like that. The more that we all understand it, the more it's going to be reflected in those policies. Uh, there's a number of countries that have embarked on initiatives, for instance, to encourage vegan eating or to encourage more vegan eating. And it's these kinds of things that can also happen in India, the more that people understand the importance of doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because, like you said, that these institutions are also at the end of the day human institutions. They are occupied by humans like you and me, and when the change starts from the grassroots, it automatically translates to positions of authority as well, and it reflects in the policy decisions too. So thank you so much. I think that was a very wonderful observation because I'm sure that a lot of people are, intrigued to know that what's happening at the policy front. But like you said, it has to start at the grassroots level, and then eventually it will definitely show at the policy level as well. So,
It will, and
yeah,
I think we have to live by example. We can't
yes,
expect the government to. We can't put everything on government. We can't say, "Oh, the government has to fix it all." Well, what are we doing in our own lives? Are we still eating meat? Are we still wearing leather? Are we still contributing to the pollution and the climate damage? If we are, first we have to bring about that change in ourselves. If we bring about that change in ourselves, we will be better equipped to bring about changes in our friends and our family and our community at large.
yes, yes, rightly said. So, my next question is regarding, the Gen Z. Like you said, that, it all begins with one choice, and your entire journey started with that one choice in McDonald's by a 16-year-old girl. So, Gen Z these days, they want to make ethical choices. Like there is this desire somewhere to make ethical choices, but they also feel burdened. They feel overwhelmed by the kind of information that is being bombarded to them. So, what are the top three practical steps for them to reduce animal suffering today? Like I'm sure you spoke about it, in your last response as well, but I'm particularly talking about those people who are consciously willing to embrace cruelty-free, lifestyle and a vegan lifestyle, but feel overwhelmed to take that first step. So, a practical three-step or four-step guide that you would like to suggest.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's so very important for Gen Z to recognize how what we do to animals is going to affect them and affect their future going forward. We already talked about meat, egg, and dairy industries' effect on climate change, for instance. Well, the climate change and climate catastrophe is going to affect Gen Z a lot more than it's going to affect my generation, for instance. So it is Gen Z's, it's in Gen Z's benefit, their personal benefit, to create the world that they want to see for themselves. And yes, there's so many things that we can do. We can take part in PETA demonstrations. We can volunteer, for an animal protection charity or something like that. There's all sorts of those things that we can do. But the simplest ways that we can help animals, and they really are easy, is first things first, the most important and easiest thing you can do as an individual to help both animals and the planet is to be vegan. You spare the lives of up to 200 animals a year just by doing that, and you reduce your carbon footprint from food by up to 73% just by doing that, and you set yourself up for a lifetime of better health. People who are vegan have reduced risks of heart disease, certain cancers, diabetes, which I know people in their 20s don't really worry about, but over time, your arteries and so on start getting blocked that early in your 20s or even in childhood. So, it is better all around for your health, it's better all around for animals and the environment. So that's one super easy way that you can help ton of animals. Uh, Second is, again, super easy. When you're shopping, uh, just buy the vegan fashion instead of the fashion that is made from animals. Leather is the most polluting material in fashion, and it is incredibly damaging to the planet. It's poisoning our rivers, it's poisoning our lands. And here's the thing, leather for the entire world is now largely produced in countries like India and China and Bangladesh. Why? Because Western countries are refusing to pollute their own rivers, refusing to harm their own people through the environmental damage. But they're very willing to do it in places like India. That is not fair. We're not the dumping ground and the garbage dump of the entire world. You know? So it is up to us to protect our environment and our people and to say, no, we are going to be producing um, leather made from plants. And so now there's actual development of leather made from mangoes and bananas and coconuts and so on happening in India, which is far more, uh, of course, it's gentler for animals, but it's also far more gentler for the planet. Um, you asked me four things. So log on to PETA India's website. There's so many ideas on what you can do, but also these days it's very easy to, especially on social media, form a group of people, of like-minded people, get people together so that you can work together on these things. Work together on your vegan journey or work together on issues affecting animals in your own community. I think having that community spirit really helps a lot of people. So that's one good way of getting yourself motivated to help animals. Fourth, it's really easy. If, a lot of times people ask me um about my view on this or my view on that. What do I think about animals in zoos or what do I think about. So it's very easy to, in my opinion, figure out what is right and wrong. The way that we can figure this out is by simply asking ourselves, would I like to be in the place of that animal? Would I like to be sat in a cage in a zoo for the rest of my life? Would I like to have a carriage hitched to my back and spend my entire day hauling around this heavy load? Would I like to have that done to me? If the answer is no, then the animal doesn't want that either. And so that's one very easy way. It's called, when I was in school, we would call it the golden rule. Like the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which simply means treat others as you would like to be treated. And I think the same type of ethics can apply to animals as well. And so that, if you keep that in mind, then you have your answer to everything in terms of how to treat animals and what we can do.
I think that was a very useful and helpful guide, I'm sure. And I hope that, the people who are watching this get inspired from this guide that you have shared with all of us and take at least that one step or even ask that one question that, like you mentioned, that if this was done unto me, would I like it? And would I, prefer to be in that position or not? So that was, I think, a very, very strong insight and a very pertinent question that everyone should be asking themselves. My last question to you, ma'am, is that let's say a 16-year-old girl is, watching this particular podcast and she gets inspired to sort of venture into this movement or take this cause up professionally like you did when you were 16 years old and that one moment really affected you. So, what message would you like to give to a 16-year-old who's watching this particular podcast and who's very driven or who has become very curious about this movement, about this cause?
So I would just tell that person or remind that person how much power they have. It doesn't matter if you're 16 or 75. You have tremendous power to help animals. You have tremendous power to help animals by your own choices. You have tremendous power to help animals through your influence in your friends and your influence in your family. I said, for instance, that every person who goes vegan saves the lives of up to 200 animals a year. Well, what if that 16-year-old person encourages her 16-year-old friend, another friend, to go vegan? Well, that's up to 400 animals a year that the two of them have saved just by encouraging one other person to go vegan. So you have tremendous power. You don't need to wait until you're older to use it. You can use it now. And, again, if you need ideas, log on to PETA India's website, but you don't have to wait till you're older. You don't have to wait till tomorrow or something like that to help animals. We can all help animals today.
Yes, it all starts here now from today. I think that's the one takeaway that you have for our viewers. So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. Thank you for taking out your valuable time, sharing your journey. You shared some very personal stories and anecdotes with all of us, and I'm sure that someone sitting in the corner of this world hearing this would be impacted by the stories that you shared with us today. So thank you so much. I thank you on behalf of Celsius organization, and we hope to have you on our upcoming podcast and upcoming series as well. Thank you so
I
much.
would love to. And thank you for thinking of me and inviting me on.
Thank you. Thank you.